So good afternoon. If you don't know me, my name is Rita, and I am a program specialist here for the Wood County Committee on Aging. And today, this is an extremely important topic that we're going to be covering, which is a very modern day slavery, is human trafficking. And you might be wondering, where does my interest come from this and why I am personally passionate about it. Hopefully we'll be able to delve into later on in the program. But at this time, I'm going to share my screen. And in just a sec, you should be able to see what I see. All right, anybody want to give me the thumbs up to let me know that you can see my power? Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Again, my name is Rita, and a few years ago, I was sitting around the kitchen table with my family, and my mom had received a training that day at work. And it was a gentleman that was going around to several organizations and churches to spread awareness about human trafficking. And so he had brought up this book. It is called The Slave Across the Street. And it is a very heartbreaking but true story about a woman named Teresa Flores. And, in honor of Human Trafficking Awareness Month, I decided I want to share this information with you, but I do want to let you know that if you do plan to read this book, it is very detailed. And it's a very emotional topic for someone to read about. And I think that she was able to portray her feelings and experiences in a really good way. So I encourage you, if you are interested in learning more, to read her book. But I'll give you a little bit of backstory on Teresa. So she and her family moved around every couple of years, and they ended up moving to Birmingham, Michigan. And that is a very upper middle class suburb of Detroit. And she ended up really having a crush on a young man in her high school. And she was 15 years old when she was officially trafficked. So I was able to get the audiobook version of her book, and I recommend, if you like to listen to books, it's just very emotional, and it made me want to learn more. And I think that's her goal, and a lot of other survivors' goal is to let you know how we can help. And the first step is doing exactly what you're doing today. You're here for my program, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to listen. So here are some goals that we're going to have today. We're going to be able to define what human trafficking is. It's the modern day slavery, but it is broken down pretty specifically into 5 categories. So you'll see those on your screen, but it's sex trafficking, labor trafficking, involuntary domestic servitude, bonded labor, and child soldiers. One thing, I will define each one of these, but a lot of my program today is focused on sex trafficking. That is what Teresa Flores, unfortunately, was trafficked into. So we'll be focusing more on sex trafficking, but definitely we'll have some more information on the others. We're going to identify and understand victims a little bit more and understand the anti-trafficking response network in the United States. And finally, I think what's most important to pull from this is what we can each do to combat modern day slavery. So like I mentioned before, these are the 5 different types of trafficking, but in general, human trafficking is the illegal trade of human beings. It's the recruitment, the control, and the use of people for their bodies and for their labor. So through force, fraud, and or coercion, people are bought and sold against their will. And that's happening now in the 21st century. So we're going to be defining now the different types of sex trafficking. So forced labor is when someone is forced to work in a captivity with little or no pay. So this is well documented in extractive industries. So these industries consist of having children remove non-renewable raw material out of earth. So that would mean like oil and minerals. Sex trafficking is forcing, deceiving, or coercing a person to perform a commercial sex act. Sex trafficking can include forms of commercial sexual exploitation in sex tourism, pornography, and strip clubs. But what I want to point out with sex trafficking specifically is that it happens to men, it happens to women. More often does it happen to women and girls and children. And on average, a child is between 12 and 14 years of age when they are first recruited. So it's actually estimated worldwide that there are 4.5 million victims of sex trafficking. Now, if they are under 18, it is not necessary to prove force, fraud, or coercion in sex trafficking cases. So it is a crime regardless. What gets tricky, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later, is if they are over 18. Even though it is still a crime, it is more difficult to prove the fraud, coercion, or force. So back to our definitions, bonded labor is also known as debt bondage. And bonded labor is often made to look like ordinary employment agreements. So originally, someone might say or see an advertisement that says, you know, job is available, no experience is required. And then at that point, they're possibly in a contracted agreement. And then they have to start paying a debt. And the worker finds out later on that the debt is impossible to repay. So it makes that their enslavement may be permanent. Also, in some cultures, workers may inherit intergenerational or ancestral debt, which is very terrifying to imagine if you were paying your parents' debt for something. The next one is involuntary domestic servitude. So that's forcing a person to work and live in the same place for little or no pay. This consists of an individual working in a private residence, and it makes inspection from authorities even more difficult. And these domestic workers are often not given the same basic benefits and protection that are normally bestowed upon workers. And finally, child soldiers is unlawful recruitment or use of children, and that could be through fraud or force or coercion. So thousands of children are currently serving as child soldiers around the world, and these children are commonly being forced into sexual slavery, fighting on the front lines, participating in suicide missions, and acting as spies, messengers, or lookouts. And, you know, for me, when I was first learning about this, I didn't realize all of this was happening in our world. And it is happening in the United States today. And so there's a lot to be said about what knowledge can do to help us hopefully combat the human trafficking, problem. So now we can identify who might be a target. And there is no firm answer. This happens to adults, minors, people of any nationality or race, US citizens, non-US citizens, any gender, although we typically see, like I said, more women and girls who are targeted. People with diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds, varied levels of education. So I always think back to Teresa Flores, who was in a very wealthy suburb and had a mom and dad who were present and a sibling and was going to school and had big plans for her future, yet she was still being trafficked. So we tend to see that there is not a lot of consistency when it comes to these types of things. But what we do know is that there are some very large vulnerabilities for some people. So this can affect anyone, but are there telltale signs? And unfortunately, there are. I'm going to take a minute here. So, and I will be sharing with you later on a couple of websites, but I have some information that I'm pulling from, that I have a whole binder here. People who are victims are often those searching for employment or pursuing an opportunity to further their education. People can also become victims when they are tricked into believing that they found love or affection. That's actually called the lover boy tactic. And that is when a trafficker poses as a boyfriend. So others come from poverty-stricken areas and are forced to migrate for work, or they are driven out of their home because of instability. Those people that are vulnerable are probably seeking a change, right? There's something going on in their life that is very difficult to live with, and they're desperate for something different. So listed on the screen here are some really large vulnerabilities that studies have been showing as consistencies across the board when talking to survivors. So people who are homeless, of course, need money, they need food, they need a place to live. Someone who has experienced abuse in the past may find that the abuse they're experiencing now is normal, even though it is not. That's maybe all that they know. Substance abuse. Now, this is really big when you are seeing people who are trafficked tied in a drug ring. And that might be because the trafficker is giving them the drugs that they seek, that they need. And in return, they are providing acts of, sexual trafficking or labor. So they might be relying on the person for drugs in exchange. So poverty, displacements after a disaster. And I think one of the biggest ones that's worth noting is the lack of family or friend support. So this is an issue for people that don't have anybody looking out for them, who are not catching the red flags that we tend to see with people in these positions. So now, who are the perpetrators, and typically, what do they look like? Unfortunately, family members is a big factor here. Intimate partners who, again, use that lover boy tactic of making them love the perpetrator and then taking advantage of it. Pimps, gangs, diplomats, drug dealers. So for instance, Teresa Flores was used as a favor for the drug ring that her perpetrators were part of. So in exchange for a client purchasing drugs, Teresa would then be the gift given to those people. So it's very unfortunate how these situations happen, but it can come from anywhere. And I think what's quite obvious, but could be, and this is happening, is that the children or the people who are being trafficked are blamed. Why did you get into this life? Or did they have, a bad upbringing? And survivors, part of this research study that I read, are begging people to ask a different question. Who is the guy buying the sex? It's been reported that many men who buy girls start out with a pornography addiction. And then when that became boring, they resort to prostitution. And when that becomes less interesting, they will search for girls younger and younger. And unfortunately, there's some vulnerabilities that people, leads them into this life that they thought would be better for them. Now, where are they being recruited? So, on certain apps, like social media apps, could be encouraging girls to meet in a public place like the mall or the movies. They might meet people in schools like Teresa was. Um, they could be misleading friendships that turn into boyfriends. There could be advertisements out there for false jobs. So again, the quote, "Do you dream of a life with more money? No need for experience," is typically what you would see on these advertisements. Prostitution, strip clubs, drug rings, video chats. If girls decide that they really want to make money, this is unfortunately a path that some people are led down to make enough money to make ends meet. Family arrangements and abductions. So I have to admit, before I knew what I knew now, movies made me think that human trafficking happened mostly with abductions, because that's what we tend to see. But actually, it happens more often with the second bullet point, the misleading friendships that turn into boyfriends. So they're promised these things that they may have never experienced in their life: safety, stability, whether that means living in one home or having someone love them consistently. They're promised a job, they're promised education, quote, a better life. And one thing, always worth coming back to is the love and affection and the attention. And if people are not getting that, possibly as a young teenager, they may seek it and get down a really bad path like this one. And of course, money, gifts, clothes, things like that. But a lot of times it turns into violence and threats, controlling behaviors, lies, and manipulation. Now, where are people being sold? So, where is this taking place? So, if you've ever heard of Backpage, Backpage is no longer a functioning website, but it was founded in 2004 and it was seized in April of 2018 by federal law enforcement. And they found it to be the largest marketplace for buying and selling sex. So Craigslist was another way, Facebook advertisements, porn page advertisements, emails, so on and so forth. You'll notice on here, hotels and motels. There is a statistic out there about any large sport gathering. So that could be the Super Bowl or, the same type of event for any sport. But that being a really large issue, and you tend to see it skyrocket with sex trafficking victims and in prostitution. So hotels and motels, staff are frequently being trained even more to recognize when that might be happening in their place. Truck stops, clubs, bars, drug rings, things like that. So here are some interesting statistics. Talking about technology, we mentioned that pretty much all of the ways that people are being recruited is through digital means. But these statistics are pretty interesting to look at. 81% met their trafficker in person. Now, this was based on a study of 111 survivors. But more recently, what they're finding in recent years of research, they are being recruited online. 77% were under 18 when they were first trafficked. So the average was 16 years old for this group of people. And 48% claimed that they gained trust within just 1 month of knowing their trafficker. And 82% gained their trust within 4 months. So it possibly doesn't take very long if someone knows how to manipulate, right? They shower them with gifts. They shower them with affection. They shower them with everything that they may have never experienced in their life until now. So it was very quickly how fast this could turn bad. So what we see is cell phones, tablets, social media, and websites forced to be putting their advertisements online as escorts, even if they are not 18. Chat rooms are often used to exchange information. Social media is used to target, stalk, and land victims, as well as to convey, buy, and sell pornographic records of sex trafficking. So how come, we are noticing that these victims are gaining trust? And I mentioned this. The victims may have never experienced a family before. And they probably came from a bad or neglected home situation. They felt loved and cared for and would woo the victims with promises of romance. So interestingly enough, 61% of those 111 victims had a romantic relationship with their controller. So really truly believe that they loved them and would do anything for them. So if their trafficker told them they had to do certain acts of sex with other people, they may feel that that is their duty to their romantic partner. So how come victims don't just leave? How come if they're or beaten or taken advantage of and are miserable, how come victims don't just walk right out the door? There are a lot of barriers to self-identification. And that means people even being aware that they are being trafficked, that this is not normal, that this is not legal. There are a lot of vulnerabilities. Debt bondage, isolation, and I'll throw them all up here so you can take a look. There could be a lot of threat of violence to their loved ones. So going back to the book I mentioned before, Teresa was initially threatened with these pictures they took of her while she was naked. They drugged her to get to that point. And they threatened that they will send this to her father's work and make sure that he is shamed and possibly fired from his job. They threaten killing their pets at their home. They take away any transportation or any means of communication. They create this distrust of authority figures like police officers. They are given these false promises, or they're made to think that they deserve what they're getting. Maybe they are being abused, physically abused by them, and they're being told that they deserve it for what they did wrong. In some places, the documents or their personal ID are being withheld, or they fear that they're going to get arrested or deported. There may be some language barriers, that they don't know the native language where they're at. They may be isolated. So if I can just walk out the door, where do I go? Well, I've been told over and over that the police won't help me, that they're just going to throw me in jail. Or they feel like nobody is going to help them. Maybe they feel a sense of hopelessness. And one thing that really stuck out to me was the loyalty to the trafficker. So even though they are doing these bad things, there's that foundation of what they believe is love and affection, when actually it's a lot of lies and manipulation. And like I said, they may be unaware of that they are being trafficked. So here are some red flags. Someone might owe a large debt that is unreasonable and they will never make enough to pay it off. So they are bonded by that debt. If you find that someone is very fearful or anxious, submissive or tense, paranoid, they show signs of physical abuse. If they don't have an ID, if they are with someone much older than them. You know, we've heard a few stories here and there about people on airplanes, the flight attendants who are definitely workers that can help combat human trafficking. But you'll hear that they noticed the girl didn't have luggage. She wasn't in control of her own money or her ID. And she looked significantly younger than the person that was with them. And it was clear that it was a romantic relationship. So those are some red flags that we hope to catch. And it happens all the time, and we may not be able to catch it because it's very not always so evident. Someone who's not allowed to speak for themselves or show this fearful behavior when it comes to law enforcement. So these are some really scary, situations that people could be in. But if we are able to catch the red flags and report what we see, we could be potentially helping that person. So for example, in that research study that I told you about with the 111 survivors, one of the survivors talked about how her teacher was pretty much putting a bug in her ear about how she was being treated. The teacher was noticing that the same man was picking her up every day and started questioning her about it. Is he your boyfriend? And this teacher was trying really hard to make sure that she created a safe space for this victim to come to her. And it ended up working out that the teacher gave her a cell phone that she could use whenever she needed it, and in her own time was able to come forward and get out of that bad situation. So it could take a teacher, it could take a first responder, it could take a neighbor to notice that these things are happening. So there is a hotline that I will have the number up very soon where people can call. You can actually go online as well if you have a report. But here are some interesting statistics about where we see a lot of the calls come from that go to this hotline. So these are the top 10 ranked states for the number of calls. Now, this exact stat is from 2015, but in looking for updates about if that has changed, the top 5 have not. So California, Texas, Florida, and Ohio are the highest ranked states for number of calls that they get. And Toledo has been named a place where we tend to see a lot of trafficking victims. Does anybody have any guesses as to why we would see more calls in that area?
I think it's the Turnpike and 75, or
Yep.
easy access.
Yep.
Yeah, 75 for sure.
75. Yeah, and other places, anywhere you see, like you mentioned, the Turnpike or Route 66 are really long stretches where there are truck stops and a lot of people coming through. So a really sad statistic, but true, human trafficking victims have a 40% higher chance of death than the common person. It is estimated, and that is a big keyword, estimated, that there are anywhere between 20 and 40 million people that are held in slavery today. What is very difficult about this is that this goes under the radar too often. It's very difficult to pinpoint where these are happening, these situations are happening, and over half of the criminal human trafficking cases in the US were sex trafficking cases involving only children. So it is happening readily, but we are unable to catch all of these perpetrators. And in other countries too, where law enforcement may not be as involved as much as they are here. Over 70% of human trafficking victims are women and girls, but that does not mean it doesn't happen to men and boys, but it more definitely happens with women. Human trafficking generates an estimated $150 billion per year. And what's sad is that traffickers face a mere 1% chance of ever being prosecuted. So what I mentioned earlier is if a survivor was under 18 when they were being trafficked and they were helped before they were 18, they do not have to prove anything to make it a crime. So if they're over 18, it gets trickier. So that's why, unfortunately, a lot of these cases don't end up going through very far. So why should it be our concern? You know, this is something that is happening in our neighborhoods, in our communities, but it is debasing our common humanity. It tears apart our social fabric. It distorts our markets. And it endangers public health, and it fuels violence and organized crime. And this is what's called modern day slavery. So we need to tell people about it. We need to be aware and hopefully give support to victims when we can help them. And I'll talk about how we can do that. When I was going through different research articles and places where survivors were being very open about what they were going through, they talked about the need for stuff we may not think about. So after they're saved, after they are pulled from a really difficult situation, how can we actually help people? Well, they need housing and basic necessities. They need an education. It's very possible that they got into this line of work because they were uneducated. And now that they're out, how will they make money? Need to provide support groups and legal services, medical care. I mean, you imagine if someone were being made to have sex with several people. Think about all the medical problems that they could be enduring, not only emotional and mental problems, but physical problems as well. And medical care can be very expensive, and same with mental health care. And job training and skill development opportunities. So the agency that I've been watching for a long time is called A21. And so that's where a lot of this information is coming from. And they talked about different ways that each of us could contribute to the support of victims. So we can advocate and have education in our schools. And yes, as young as our middle schoolers, because like I said, the average age that most people are trafficked are between 12 and 14 years old. So advocating that this education takes place in schools, raising awareness with your friends, your family, or people that you know. Or if you are a lawyer or you're willing to pay for someone to represent a survivor during the court proceedings. You need to report suspicions of human trafficking to law enforcement or by calling a hotline. You can provide employment opportunities for survivors of human trafficking if you're a business owner or a manager. You can sponsor a survivor of human trafficking to attend a university through a scholarship program. Or you can donate to charities that you trust that you know are supporting victims of human trafficking. So I pulled this quote from a survivor who talked about the difficulties of being saved from the situation that she was in. So this is a quote from her directly. When you get arrested for prostitution or anything of that sort, they make you go through court. You pay fines and you sit in classes. Instead of sending someone to a class who tells you that you're an evil person because you're a prostitute, they should offer you services instead. They should offer hard skills. Don't tell me not to just not do it. I had to pay $300 for classes and $300 for fines. Plus I had rent and food and other necessities that I needed to buy. How am I supposed to get the money? If I have no skills to get a job, how do I get a job? But if I don't get a job, I can't pay the fine, and then I go back to jail. But if I go out and get some money that I know I can get and pay the fine, and I can pay my rent, I might go back to jail. She said, they treated me like I was a disgusting hooker instead of a 15-year-old who got caught. They kept saying, you're over 18, stop lying to us. I think there needs to be more sensitivity training. And unfortunately, that is the case. If there is a distrust with law enforcement within communities, that might be really hard to come forward with your issue. So how do we take this awareness into action? It's going to take you, it's going to take your friends, it's going to take your community. The more that we know, the better we can help. And even if it's just for one person. So A21 is the agency that I was talking about. They go for the one woman, the one man, the one child, and they want to help see a good end to their story. So they fight and they sacrifice for those people. And we can do the same. So here is the hotline, the two hotline numbers. The first one is where adults can call, and then minors can call as well. So there are over 200 languages. Interpreters are available. And there's a resource and technical assistance center, a referral service where they can get help locally, and access to get them help and stay safe. And this is toll free. So I'll make sure to share this information with you where I got my, my information today. But I want to share with you a video. Teresa Flores is the woman who I talked about earlier, and she has the book. She also has a website. And so I'm going to show you a short clip. I'm hoping we're going to be able to see my screen okay.
Human trafficking is happening in every zip code, and mostly to children. My dad worked for a big corporation. We would get promoted and we would move every 2 years. We moved to a very rich suburb of Detroit. It was February of my sophomore year of high school. I had a crush on this guy. He said, would you like a ride home from school? And I was so naive. I really thought he was going to take me home. He gave me a pop that was laced with drugs, and then I got raped. But he said, and I took these pictures. We're going to show these to your dad. We're going to show these to his boss, and you have to earn them back. And they would drive me all around the Detroit area. I would have to service anywhere from 4 to 10 men. My worst night was being left for dead in a Detroit motel. I thought this was the end of the road. It was really a miracle that I got saved out of that.
At 14, I had been sold numerous times while I was being trafficked. And so you just lived with all the shame and guilt.
When somebody's being sold to men, you're told you're worthless. It's hard. The SOAP project stands for Save Our Adolescents from Prostitution. Most survivors have no idea there's a phone number that they can call. So I decided I was going to put it on a bar of soap. We get people together. They help us buy cases of Motel soap. We'll put these labels on it. And this amazing thing happened. People said yes, they took the soap.
I mean, countless organizations have learned how to spot human trafficking because of her.
Now I work with all the survivors. My hope is that we get stronger laws against the guys that are buying them.
I was trafficked when I was 15. I came to an event that Teresa was speaking at. It gave me the courage to be able to come forward. So that day, the day that I met Teresa, I opened my case with Homeland Security.
She's a model for us that we can have a happy, normal life. We are a sisterhood.
Trafficking needs to be spoken about every day for this to end. And Teresa has the capability of doing that by using her voice.
She's heard some pretty amazing stories of girls who have said, I found your soap. I made the call. I'm here today because of you.
That's what makes this award so special for me, is because of that word worth. Like, that word is everything to me.
Okay, so I don't know if you were able to see the video with that, but I hope that you were able to hear it at least. But like I said, I highly recommend checking out her book. It changed my life. It changed my view on this issue. So I'm going to open up the floor now for comments or questions that hopefully I can answer, or just a general conversation.
Your subject really hit home. We did transport one that was a trafficked gal. We don't know her age. She looked about 14. We don't even know her name because everything you said was so true. She was pregnant too. She had lice all over her body. She would not talk to us, therefore we didn't know anything about her. And she definitely would not have eye contact with us at all.
Yeah.
So I remember her, and she was so hurt. I honest to God, how does somebody ever recover from that? I don't know that. I don't know how that would be.
Yeah.
I don't even know how long she had been trafficked. She looked like she was 14, but we don't know anything.
Yeah.
So.
But because you were a first responder, you were helping her in that situation, right? So hopefully
We
that
were
was a
transporting
step
her
towards
to
the
the
right direction.
hospital, taking her to the hospital because she was
Oh, wow.
gonna have this baby. We weren't there when she got released from her perpetrator. We were just transporting at that particular time, but nobody knew her name or where she came from, if she had family, nothing. She was just like a lost soul, just lost.
Wow.
Lost.
And you think about all those kids in that situation, just like her, who are desperate for something better,
Right.
but unfortunately can't get out.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
I hope she recovered somehow. I
hope
don't
so
know.
too. I hope so too.
When I mentioned that we did classes and stuff like that, education on that, it was because at that time, Toledo was one of the high ranking sex trafficking areas. It could have been 4th in the country at that
I think
time.
it was.
Yeah, about 20 years ago. Not that I'm old.
Still the case today.
It
It is highly
it-
ranked.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
It was a big deal. It was back when the gangs were kind of big too. So.
You know, if you notice in the video, they talked about the soap at the end. And unfortunately, they didn't dive into that further. But Teresa mentioned that she thought about the only time that someone might be alone. And it's possibly when they're getting pampered in the bathroom and they're washing themselves and they're putting makeup on. So the soap that they find in the bathroom has that phone number. And that's the idea, that they would be alone at that time to make that call. There were some local efforts being done before the pandemic where they were doing that in this area. Now, she was trafficked in Birmingham, Michigan, so there very well may be several groups doing that as well. Has anybody had other experiences that they would like to share, or any comments or questions?
That 1% arrest rate, Rita, seems so low. And I just
The conviction
wondered,
rate, it's the conviction rate that's very low.
conviction rate, it seems so low, you know?
It is.
I just wonder what the problem is, these
hard.
people that are victims, aren't they reporting, and
They won't talk.
they won't talk?
This girl wouldn't talk. She wouldn't rat on who did that to her.
Are they in fear of their life?
Yeah.
Are they fearful that they're going to be killed or what?
So one survivor that I skipped over her story somehow, but she talked about being threatened to be beaten with a bat. She would be thrown outside in the snow naked. She would be thrown boiling water on her if she were to try and escape, if she were to talk back or threaten to leave. I mean, these people are threatened physically. They're threatened that their families' lives will be at risk. There are a lot of things holding them down. Very, scary situations if it does happen, but it really does. They are being beaten. So I think it's a big, fearful hurdle to
Yeah.
report. And again, feeling that loyalty to the trafficker, even though
Brainwash.
it's not a good situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Oh, there's a lot of misinformation out there,
Mhm.
I think. A Facebook friend of mine, well, I've started to just disregard a lot of things, but he posts a lot of misinformation, like memes, and about a week ago, uh, be aware of zip ties holding your door handle with the car next to it, because while you're busy trying to um, find some scissors and cut through the zip tie, somebody's going to abduct you and sell you into slavery.
Mm.
And I immediately looked out there to do a fact check, and I found something, but not everybody believes Snopes, and I just posted it. And this person just continuously does this, and I just don't feel like confronting them, but
Yeah.
about 1 out of 10, I'll find, something to dispute that. And, what else can you do? I mean, it's like whack-a-mole, you
Yeah.
know? But I felt in that case, I really needed, because in the back of my head, I thought I had heard something along that the vast majority of people that find themselves being trafficked um, are people they know. And
Mhm.
it's not in the parking lot kind of a thing. And the thing about the family members, and I forgot her name, but the woman who was executed on the federal level recently, um, her father pimped her out.
Mm.
He would take her. I think he would do construction work. I think he was freelancing. I might have the details wrong. He would take her, and then he would say, "Oh, by the way, how would you like to blank my daughter?"
Mm.
And he would pocket the money.
Yeah.
It just, what goes on in people's minds. But it's there's a lot of misconceptions out there,
Yeah.
and you just choose when to and how to inform people. They've been misinformed.
Yeah. Yeah, the best we can do is have open conversations.
Yeah,
When
right.
I like to, especially when I read this book, I told people I knew, you
Yeah,
wouldn't believe the reality of a place an hour away from me in Birmingham, Michigan. You
yeah,
wouldn't believe what is going on for young people um, who don't know how to get out. And
yeah.
so I recommend their A21 is the agency I've been talking about.
Hmm.
Thorn is the other one, THORN.
Hmm.
And that one is also really focused on combating sex trafficking, but they are using technology and the research to figure out how best they can help. But if you follow one or both of those on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, they provide a lot of great information regularly about, common myths or misconceptions about human trafficking. So you can read quickly about them, share them on Facebook. They're both reputable agencies, and hopefully we can get a better outreach for people to learn more. So if you're on social media, take a search A21 or Thorn, And there's
Mhm.
several other agencies. There's local agencies that you can take a look at as well.
Okay.
I've
Anything else? Oh, go ahead, Lynn.
myself, and it's like I don't know. Well, there's people that like they'll get something and they post it. It says repost it, and some of it like zip tie, and I thought, that sounds kind of weird. But anyway, this stuff, this kind of like passing your daughter off for sex is I mean, it's in the Old Testament. I mean, through various places in the Old Testament, it's nothing new, and it was accepted.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, as strange as it is, but anyway, how did, other than reading the book, how did you get so interested? How did you get interested in this, and why are you, like you said, passionate about it?
So, I have a niece who is 16. And so, we're not very far apart in age. And all I kept thinking is how vulnerable that age group is.
Yeah.
I witness her insecurities and I witness her struggles. And I was really fearful of someone who has a good family, a good home, like Teresa did, get into a really bad situation. So I felt very personal, and I'm telling you, if you read the book, I think you will be pulled as passionately as I was, because she paints a really ugly picture, a really, really ugly reality that she went through. And it got me to find a local group that I'm part of in Sylvania. It's through a group at Lourdes University. And so their efforts are really locally based with the different people who are teachers and work in different fields that are trying to just spread awareness. So working with other people that also feel that the urge to help, because you feel kind of helpless in these situations. It feels like you can't really do much, but having open conversations is something I love to do about anything. But this was just something it felt like I had to.
Yeah, we when Betty was first in ministry up in this area, we were in Moline, Ohio, which is suburb of Walbridge. Way we would get a lot of people that would come, wanting help and so forth, and a lot of them were from. So they said they like got off the turnpike at on 280 in the turnpike, and miles from there. And you see stuff in the paper and you'd hear stuff on the scanner and you do stuff, there's weird stuff with, but I always we would go over there sometimes at the truck stops to eat because truck stops have good food. But that was a alternate universe, parallel universe. It was like, here's Lake Township, here's Wood County, which is pretty much just middle America, but then there's this weird microcosm right in the middle of it all, where there's all these people traveling. There's all kinds of untoward things going on. You just had this feeling that there was like this was an evil place,
Right.
But I don't think we ever really run across anything like that. We did have a guy that he was traveling across the turnpike with his boyfriend, lover, or something. We don't know what was going on. And the guy left him. He was from New Jersey.
Wow.
And so it was just very strange. And he made his way to the church in Stony Ridge, the Methodist church. And myself and another guy, we got him a bus ticket and sent him on his way. But it was like, this is really weird, And I'm not saying that it was a traffic situation or whatever, but there's weird stuff going on. I mean, and well, it's like, how many times do you hear about sorry, lot lizards, in the truck stops and so forth. We've got, Wood County's got its share of truck stops, up on 280 and down north Baltimore and 75. There's probably stuff happening all over the place that we don't know about and probably don't want to know about. But anyway, it's disturbing. It really is. And I mean, part of it is you don't want to get involved because you might think you might become a victim somehow of their of the violence. Like the person is close by that is threatening them, and that you might end up being killed or whatever. But this is real stuff. And I a number of years ago when we lived in the Sandusky County, there was a group that a talk that we did about this, and they passed out combs, like hair combs. Okay, I have no use for that, but hair combs with the phone number of like a human trafficking thing, and I've got a couple of them around here, just in case I need a comb. But anyway, but anyway, and that's they were talking about how that's ways that they reach out to people.
Right.
But we also heard about the soap thing. So
but kind of any way to get something in those people's hands who just need a reminder that there is help.
I don't know where I've run across anything like that. I mean, I pretty much stick in Bowling Green,
Right.
And but with the university, I'm sure that happened, but I don't know.
You mentioned Lake Township. That was probably number one Wood County area.
Oh yeah.
But you spoke about Teresa. I think that her case, once she had 2 years of hell, if I might say that. I bet her family rallied around her and smothered her with comfort and love. And I think that that's a pretty rare thing that happens to these mostly gals, like you said, trafficked gals. I think they're despondent, left alone, and there probably isn't enough agencies in the United States to care and take care of these people. I keep thinking about that one little gal. I don't know.
I think you're very right about how, the lack of family support is a major issue. And you're right, Teresa, right under her parents' home, was taken out in the middle of the night every night. I mean, you wonder what their family dealt with, knowing that what she went through afterwards. Right. But, right. What did these girls do? What do these people do without a family afterwards? Okay, they're helped. Okay, so now what? How do I move forward? And like the story I told you of, they have to pay fines, and then they, the only way that they know how to make money is illegal ways, or they might have a drug addiction that they're dealing with. So it takes a lot of compassion and empathy to get past our assumptions about some people. There very well may be people who are choosing to be part of the prostitution, but that may be their only choice. That may be what they're left with, how they know how to make money.
I've often wondered how enforcement and the judicial system, how the juvenile judicial system, how they deal with it. I for some reason, I don't know what it is, but I have total distrust of law enforcement. Okay. And so I'm often wonder why, I can just imagine them like also treating them like crap and, getting nowhere with it.
Making assumptions, I think, is what some survivors had talked about, assuming that they're over 18 and they're choosing this.
Mhm.
Generally, those police officers know them by their first name. They
Oh.
know them. They know them very well.
Well, I've often heard that the first place you're assigned when you go into law enforcement is you work at the jail and get to know the people you're going to be dealing with.
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of like sensitivity to their situation that needs to happen, and that starts with a conversation like this, where we might have some assumptions about people. Where sure we're against human trafficking, but if they were a prostitute first, are we still going to be supportive of them and the choices that they made, even though they're over 18? Did we look at why they got to that point? Did we look at the path that they took to get there and the desperate situation that they're in? Not all of us take the time to figure out where they come from and how they got there. So I really do appreciate all of you being on and being willing to listen. I'm always open to a conversation with anybody and learning more. And like I said, if you want to any of this information, I will make a note. Let me get a piece of paper real quick. So if you want to raise your hand at this point, I can write your name down and I will make sure to email you some information that I've got. All right. You got it. All right. And for those of Janice.
That one statistic you had about 70% of the victims are female and 30% are male, that was shocking to me.
Do you think higher for?
I would have thought 90% female, maybe 10% male.
Now that is a statistic including labor trafficking.
Oh, okay. So that's not just sexual.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That would skew it a lot. Yeah, because labor trafficking could be 50-50,
Right. Right.
Rita, I came on a little late. And what was the name of the book?
The Slave Across the Street.
Okay.
And her name is
Thank you.
Teresa Flores, Flores.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, thank you everybody for joining today. And I'll make sure to get that information out to you.
Okay.
Becky, did you want the information? You just got back on camera here with us.
No.
No. Oh, okay.
I
All
think
right.
my email's in the.
I did get that. Thank you,
Okay,
Janice.
thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining
Thanks,
us.
Rita. It was great.
Rita.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Rita.
Thanks.
Thank
Good
you.
Yeah.
research.